That reminds me of a wonderful, piece that we saw by Stefan Molyneux. He's really so great. He's such a high level counselor. And he was counseling this one lady, and it was entitled "Women Cannot Have It All." Okay, and she was this lady. I'm just sort of summarizing here. Oh, I'm sorry. There was two wonderful videos by him in the last couple of days where he's counseling these people, and it's so brilliant. I mean, he's so incredibly nuanced. He has this in-depth analysis. And of course, he's a philosopher who's extremely positive about Christianity and Christian civilization, but very spiritual. And he was speaking with this lady, and she was wanting to pursue a PhD, okay, because she wanted to get into the study and research of psychology. And he said, okay. And then, as she's explaining herself, because she knows, all the listeners know on his channel, you can't get away with bull crap, right? So they're kind of intimidated when they start talking to him. And so they don't reveal everything up front. And so, it takes like an hour for him to probe all that stuff out. But basically, this is the story was, here's this lady, she wants to do a PhD. At the same time, she wants to have kids, so she wants to be there for her kids. She doesn't want to be an absentee mom. She listens to him enough that she knows that that's extremely dangerous, and it's probably one of the worst situations you can put your children in. And it's actually a form of psychological child abuse. But so she understands all that. And then she wants to have children. She wants to get a PhD. She wants to work in the administrative offices of her university. And she wants to be her husband, be there for her husband, et cetera. And, et cetera. And he's just saying, look, excuse me, don't mean to be rude, with his little British accent, light British accent. Excuse me, I don't mean to be rude. There's not enough hours in a day to do all this. Do you understand this? And he's like, I don't mean to you can't do this all. And one of the questions he asked her was amazing. He said, why do you want to study other people's children and not raise your own? It seems crazy to me. He's like, if I wanted to start this show on philosophy, I didn't have to go get a PhD, and I've influenced over 1 billion people. The university is dead. The university, you can maximally, influence 1,000 people, maybe maximally a couple thousand in terms of your career over 10 years. Right? And then juxtapose that with this channel that he's influenced 1 billion people. Had over 500 million or something like that read his book. I mean, it's like, and he's completely dismantling and showing how defunct, dysfunctional, incompetent, and useless the university has become. It's not become a place of thinking. It's not become a place of critical learning. It's not become a place of mental intellectual fruition or burgeoning. It's become a place of intellectual stultification, stagnation, and death. Okay, and he's saying, look, you can't have it all. As you as a woman, you can't have it all. You have to be realistic. If you don't stay home, at least for the first couple years of your child, that child, you're not going to be able to breastfeed that child. You're not going to be able. He goes on this whole thing. You're not going to be able to have that skinship. You're not going to be able to have. You're not going to be able to raise those kids, your kids, in the formative years. If you're on top of that, you're working, and on top of that, you want to have a strong marriage. You're going to neglect your husband during that time, and he just broke it down. And then in a sort of related conversation, he was saying he had this whole discussion. It was actually with another lady, but similar kind of consulting. But he went into this whole discussion about the women's vote, and he broke that down. And he broke it down in a very unique way. He said, what happened after the women's vote? You see the sort of socialization of the country, precipitously increased because of the women's vote. And he was saying, we have to think about this in terms of, number one, property rights, income, and number three, the draft. Critical 3 factors that you have to understand when you see the women's vote. Because as soon as women get the right to vote, the country begins to quickly become socialist. And of course, we know the Pew Report trends and the polls that show that women, especially unmarried women, are not conservative at all. They're extremely socialist. Right? They vote two times more socialist than unmarried men. So we know that women have a tendency to vote more socialist. And he's saying he wasn't saying that it's because they're women. Okay, he was saying, look at the factors that are involved. Women on average did not have property rights, right, or did not have as much property than men. Okay, so it used to be in UK and English common law that you had to own property to vote, right? So if you own property to vote, then you're more likely to respect property rights and want to protect property rights because you own property. You're more likely to want to help create an economic and political system where property rights are protected. Okay? Now, number two, if you have property, you most likely have some type of income. Okay? So if you have a property, you most likely have some income, and you thus will vote in a manner in which you can protect incomes, right? You can protect your income. So you're not going to want to have artificial manipulation by the government into the market, which will then manipulate and destroy your income, right? Or create artificial barriers or artificial structures that will impede your ability to create income, such as a artificial minimum wage or you know what I'm saying, things like that. So if you're likely to own property, you're going to likely vote to protect private property. Of course, that's connected to the Second Amendment and protecting your private property with firearms. If you're more likely to have income, and if you're more likely to have income, you're more likely to want the free market instead of government interference. And number three, the men who used to vote also were subject to the draft. Okay, so because you're subject to the draft and you have to walk into machine gun fire and literally die, if the political elites rule and create stupid laws and stupid wars, you're the one who has to go out and die. Okay? So you have a serious consequence, either life, property, or limb, or income. And so you are seriously concerned about the state of affairs of your political system. You are seriously concerned about the state of affairs of these politicians, what laws they're passing. Now, women had no property or less property. They had some property. Sometimes they would inherit their husband's property. So women at that time had less property. So they're less, as a group, right? As a group, they're going to be less protective of property rights because they're coming into a situation where the majority of them do not have property. So they're not property owners. So they're not inherently invested in trying to protect property rights, which is, by the way, the fundamental rubric of a free society. It's a fundamental rubric that you're able to define and define your realm of ownership. So then once you're able to do that, you can deal with another person who also has a defined set of ownership and then mutually exchange, trade, exchange products and services. You see what I'm saying? You have to be able to define yourself. If you have nothing, everybody has nothing, or everybody owns everything, you own nothing, right? So you can't identify what I can trade, which will be advantageous for myself and for the other person mutually. You can't identify anything. You can't be free. You can't be these agents that are independently trading between one another in a freedom and sovereignty-based system. Okay, so anyways, property rights is absolutely key. Women did not have did not have that much property, so they came in. They're less concerned about property rights. Now, if they're married, they're going to be more concerned because they are going to have a husband who owns property, and so those women, and statistically we see, they vote more conservatively if they're married. Okay, they want to protect their husband's assets. They are going to vote in a way that's more conservative. They actually vote more like men. Okay. Okay, so they had less income too. So because they have less income, they want to vote for artificial manipulation of the market so they can get more income. So essentially the vote is, what are we going to do as a nation with our resources, right? So once women got the right to vote, they said, okay, well, we want those resources. We have less income, give us more income. We don't have a lot of property, redistribute property. Let's have a system where we can redistribute property. And of course, in America, they don't actually redistribute the property, but you have a lot more rights as a woman. You have a lot more. The legal system is, for example, in your benefit. The judicial system is in your benefit, especially when it comes to custody laws and your husband have to pay, the man having to pay for the child support, okay? Especially with the fact that after women get the vote, men's participation in taxation, they have to pay the vast majority of the burden. So women are started demanding en masse. Of course, there's some, we're talking about bell curve. There's some outliers. But in terms of bell curve, they started voting for socialist policies, redistribution of wealth in multiple ways. And of course, other things like give me an education, give me this or that. Through the vote, you have the use of just the resources. You get, what are we going to do with the resources? Number two, how are we going to use violence to get those resources, right? That's the coercion of the state, right? So as soon as the women, and he said it, as soon as the women saw that the state was a much more reliable provider than men in general, they started demanding more from the state. And thus, this Department of Education, Department of what, et cetera, and all these stupid departments keep rising. And the women's vote clearly goes towards those things. Clearly goes, especially unmarried women. Their vote is extremely socialist. And of course, you see the quick precipitation towards socialism. So, and by the way, they don't have to go to the draft. Now, if women had to die, if women were saying, okay, if you get the vote, but you get to be drafted too, and you get to die, and potentially not only die, but you have to go on the battle lines, front lines, and if you get held hostage, you're going to probably be raped 100,000 times by your captors. You're going to have to pay that price if you get the vote, just like men have to go and die in wars and are subject to the draft. Now women would be much more serious about the political system, you see, instead of being sort of sentimental about, let the immigrants pour in, they're really poor, I empathize with them artistically. I want them to come in, I would want that opportunity too, seriously, that's a sentimental thing. Instead of thinking, well, if the immigrants come in, it's going to disenfranchise black people or poor minorities in urban areas. And if they're illegally allowed to come in, then you're letting the ones come in like MS-13. You're thinking about a larger picture instead of just sentimentally thinking, well, just let them in. Their families are breaking up. Oh my gosh! You see, there's no consequence that were serious like the men had to have. The men had to have serious consequences, like having to die. You vote for the wrong people, they're going to start crazy wars. They're going to implode the economy by letting immigrants pour in from every single place in the freaking world. And you're going to have civil war inside and you're going to have to go be drafted, and you're going to have to die. Now, if women had that consequence, if they had to also get drafted, they would vote differently. Because they're human beings. I mean, people respond to incentives, okay? Women and men respond to incentives. So if you incentivized, okay, you get the vote, but you get to die too. If you vote for stupid socialists that will grow the power of the state, implode it, create a divide and conquer strategy, where in which they're always going to be pitting pieces of society against each other, and in the worst case, when their system starts failing and they don't have any more money to steal by coercion, by the way, they will start a civil war. They will start an actual war. It'll increase with riots and it's a never-ending system. You get rid of the Department of Education, and people will jump on this or that welfare system. You get rid of that, they'll jump on Social Security. You get rid of that, they're going to jump on. They're going to start rioting. If they start rioting, then you have to pay more money for the police force. It's just a never-ending system of the state. Never-ending system of state consumption. Never-ending system of state gobbling up resources. Mindlessly, dopamine high, gobbling up resources. I mean, it's like, and by the way, by coercion. Every single meal the state is eating, Every single dollar the state is eating through its giant whale-like, sperm whale-like sized mouth, Titanic Kraken-sized mouth, is coming by coercion. It's a system fundamentally based on coercion and force, not freedom, not choice, not volunteerism. It's based on force and coercion. So as soon as the women had the right to vote, but they didn't have the responsibilities of, for example, the draft and going to die if you vote in a stupid, sentimental way, and put in systems and peoples that will screw up your nation and implode it and make it a third world country, well, then of course you're going to vote for sentimentally. You're going to, however you feel. Oh, I don't feel good about that. I want to vote this way. You don't think about, well, what will be the practical consequences that will happen? Will it impede? Will it impact my property rights? Will it impact my income? Will it impact my ability to live? I mean, will I be sent to some stupid war in a draft? You see what I'm saying? So that's a fascinating thing. Now, the Chinese Constitution juxtaposed to that, obviously women can vote in Chinese in the Kingdom of God as well.
Well, it depends on the states.
Depends on the states. But the vote does not allow redistribution of resources. So you can vote for somebody at the House of Representative level, but your vote is so local, and it's so based on, it's 2,100 people. So it's so localized, okay, that you're not able to impact the greater society and create this monolithic master state. Of course, even within the Constitution, it prohibits that explicitly. The federal government can exceed 10%. So the power of the vote, even though there's still some democratic processes of voting, the power, and of course, the House of Representatives will elect the president. There will not be a popular vote for the presidency, for the emperor's seat, so to speak, which of course the presidency has become in America. It's become the emperor. The presidency in America has become the emperor's seat. And that's what it's become. It's become such a dangerous position. Trump is acting in a very reserved and actually quite judicial manner. But evil people like Obama and leftist lunatics, they get in there, they act like emperors. They are above the law. The president can act above the law. They can do executive orders now, unconstitutionally. They can wage war unconstitutionally. They can do the NDAA and imprison and kill American citizens without due process. I mean, they are above the law. They are nutbag crazy right now in America, the president's power. And actually, President Trump is actually acting quite reserved in terms of his actual power compared to Obama. If he wanted to, he could literally just say, okay, imprison these leftist lunatics. Just get them. Just get them. He could give you the order. Take them out. We're putting them in prison. We're going to put them in FEMA camps. Just like they were planning to do with the gun owners and the conservative Christians, by the way. He could say, okay, you guys were planning to do that. Now I'm in power. I'm going to do that. He could be a dictator if he wanted to, which he's not. He's not acting like a dictator. But he could be if he wanted to, given the crazy, insane powers of the United States executive branch at this point. It wasn't like that before, but at this point. But Chunagog has, of course, explicit references to the state not allowed to be in the business of welfare, buying people off and bribing people so that they get more votes to use coercion to steal resources. It doesn't allow the vote to impact the entire nation of the Kingdom of God. So the vote has a limited power. It's a limited, what will your little area do with its resources? Okay? And you have consequences. If you vote in a bad way, it's going to impact your property rights, it's going to impact your income, it's going to impact and destroy your local area, which will make everybody move out. It'll make business flee if you try to do some kind of socialist haven there, utopia there. You will collapse. And you won't, and your ability, but you will not have the ability to spread this cancer and spread this disease and to gain power over an ever-increasing behemoth, Goliath, octopus-like, slimy, subterranean, dinosaur-like, prehistoric, Tyrannosaurus Rex gobbling up mountains of carcasses of people with his power of force, okay? That is the state. And you won't be able to make it into a reliable, quote, provider, where you can use force while pretending you're doing the right thing by, quote, helping by giving your, quote, fair share, which, of course, communists don't end up doing, super elites don't end up doing. Creating this monster that will use the power of coercion, people with guns, to force other people to steal resources from them, get resources to themselves in an easy way. They will choose the easy way. It's the passive lethal resistance. We see this even in human behavior patterns when they walk in the woods, okay? Animals as well. They will choose the path of least resistance. You will not walk through a hedge of thorns if you can get around it. And there's a pathway that's cemented and it's nice. You're just going to take that path. Stealth. You move through the brush. You don't walk in open areas. Isn't that interesting? These are very common, simple things, but people don't think about them at all, unless you get the consequence of death. That's why the military guys think about it. Okay? So, the kingdom of God is able to minimize the power of irresponsible voting to redistribute resources coercively and to steal from other people. Okay? And it's able to enforce consequences upon those irresponsible areas of society that will do that. Because life will be so much better. It'll be so much better in other places and other districts of the kingdom of God that will not have those crazy redistributive attributes. You'll have a lot more success, prosperity, businesses, flourishing, beautiful restaurants, malls, and you'll have way more. Everybody's going to want to move there. But just because you move there doesn't mean you're going to be able to have the power to then centralize power there and create a, quote, big state provider which you can marry. No, because that's going to be the voting block. No matter how big it gets, it's going to be divided up into 2,100, you see. It's going to be divided up. So it sort of relativizes the power of people's inherent greed and selfishness to want to use the violent, coercive power of the state to get resources for themselves. Violence to use. They have no problem using violence. See, there's a problem. People who vote and they do not have property rights. They don't have property. It's a problem. Because they have no problem using the violence of the state to seize property, to get property for themselves, or to get stuff for themselves. Seize other people's property to get stuff for themselves. That's extremely immoral. It's an extremely immoral mindset. It's an evil mindset. You're okay with using violence to get cheddar for yourself. So Stephen Molyneux was calling it cheddar. What was he calling it? And the other one? Cheddar and guns. That's really what votes do. The voting process is a determining factor for what society's going to do with cheddar and guns. How are you going to get the cheddar? So people are going to vote for how they're going to get the cheddar. By using guns. No. Now, it's one thing if you raise your own, you made your own cheese. It's another thing if you go somewhere with a gun and say, give me that cheese. But that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing if you vote for a big state. You are saying, you're not doing it physically. You're not doing it yourself. That's why people feel okay with it. But you are actively involved in a system which is using guns to get cheddar. So you're evil. You are participating in a mafia enterprise. You are aiding and abetting a mafia enterprise, and you are destroying society. And thank God in China Guk, you will not be able to destroy society if you're that kind of irresponsible, immoral person. Thank God for the kingdom of God, because those kind of immoral attitudes will not be able to thrive. Not only are they explicitly prohibited in terms of creating centralized power, centralized departments, centralized banking, centralized education, centralized, you name it. Prohibited. One thing that's going to be markedly different is the type of education our children will receive. It's going to be so amazing, the type of education, especially with the incredible technology the kingdom of God is going to have, because there's going to be so much freedom in the markets. We're going to have the highest level of technology. Think about it. How would public school look different? I mean, we have them in little jail cells, sitting 8 hours a day in little dens of chairs, right? Many times now, the public schools have to be locked everywhere, and now because of the school shootings, they're, obviously, logically, they have to start making them a little more hard to access, etc. But how would public school look different if the government was prohibited from being involved in using the coercion of the state to enforce indoctrination to the kids? They're not going there to learn. What is that? One place in Baltimore, Stephen Molyneux was talking about, they did citywide study in Baltimore or local district-wide. They found that children could not perform math 100%. 100% of the children in Baltimore, at least in some district, area of it, segment of it, could not perform math. 100%. That's a 100% failure in math. 100%. Not one of the kids could pass a math test. It's incredible. It's incredible. So you're not going there to learn. The more the state uses the coercion of the state to steal resources for, quote, the children, the more it's not about the children, the more it's about unions and teachers trying to just keep the cheddar coming. It's just too lucrative. They got the money coming, the administrators, they got the cheddar coming, the teachers got the cheddar coming, they got higher and higher increasing wages, more bench pensions, more benefits. They don't care about this quality of school. Who's going to care more for your child? A teacher that's on some government paycheck and is more concerned about their pension, or you? Who's going to care about your child more? You or somebody else? Let's put it that way. Who's going to care about your child? If your child is hungry and your child wants to eat, who's going to feed that child? Some stranger or you? So what if that stranger is called a teacher? I don't care. You as a parent, you're going to take care of that child better. Or you're going to be concerned about your child. Right? Let me think about it. So, it's going to be incredible to see how in the kingdom of God, education is going to be markedly different. I mean, who knows, with iPads and iPhones and increasing technology, et cetera, how education would look like. It's going to be so exciting to see the kind of innovations and teaching methods and styles. I mean, you may have, like you do now, even in Europe, you may have schools which are completely outdoors, which already exist. Combining an outdoor education with school, which already exists. There's going to be so much more diversity in terms of learning real skills that you can actually practically use. You may have private institutions that create schools that, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be so, that have peace, police, people, militia incorporated into it. You don't know. That's basically what's happening here, right? And there's going to be, the classroom is obsolete now. The education system is not there to educate people. It's there for teachers and unions and administrators to get paid cheddar by using the violence of the state. That's what it's there for. There's no incentive to expose the reality of the pathetic education that these children are getting and the pathetic nature of how this administration are running these public schools. No incentive to expose that. No incentive to reveal that because there's just too much money coming in. And it's always about, we need to put more into the kids. Why don't give us more resources we can be? And the more resources they spend, now $10,000 per head in California, the more the points drop, the more they can't perform in math and science, the more they're not producing scientists and engineers, etc. You don't get rid of a cancer just by throwing money at it. You don't get rid of a problem by just throwing money at it. You have to get an antidote. You don't get rid of marital problems by just throwing money at the couple. You may, in fact, exacerbate the problem. If you got marital problems, just tossing money at them may exacerbate the problem. Because now there's going to be a fight for resources in a greater way. Anyways, Stefan Molyneux is breaking all this down, and it was so clarifying. And even the Queen was saying, "Yeah, I remember when one time Cook Joe was talking about, I think, Freedom Society, that the women's vote really socialized the country." But he didn't explain it like this. But I mean, he was making the point. And but listening to Stefan Molyneux's points about the women did not own property in general, so they did not respect property rights as much, especially if they're unmarried. They had lower incomes, so they wanted to use the forceful violence of the state to get more money in different ways or resources. And they were not subject to the draft, so they wouldn't die if they made bad decisions, so they could act sentimentally on political voting, political decisions. Whoever made them feel good, whoever kind of moved their heartstrings. That's why the Democratic Party, of course, is the party of stringing the heartstrings of voters, right? The immigration issue being the case in point. Look what's happened to Europe with 1,472% increase in rapes since 1975 in Sweden. Because you have these civilizational differences where men will treat women completely differently. Men from areas of North Africa and the Middle East, etc., they treat women totally different. Oh my gosh. You know what's been a great series? This Islamicize Me series by David Wood. Is James Wood? David Wood. Oh my gosh, his team, they are producing some incredible exposés about Islam. I mean, just outrageous. It's just incredible. They do it in a satirical fashion so that young people can see it, and young people being woke to Islam and realizing you better not convert to this. This is insane. Insane. The reality of allowing muta wives, which are temporary marriage, which is basically hoes, sexual partners, unlimited sexual partners. I mean, it's just ridiculous, okay? And they just keep on exposing it. It's amazing. And some of the crazy laws in there too, like Muhammad saying, for example, like 50% of the grave or being sent to hell is because you're not urinating properly due to urine. And so one of the laws in Islam is males have to squat and urinate. I mean, just crazy things that people never heard of. I mean, never heard of. But they give you actual verse and the actual verse in the Quran and the Hadith. It's crazy. You know, the fact that Muhammad prohibited adoption because he wanted to marry one of his son's wives. He wanted that woman. He wanted the wife, so he prohibited adoption. One of his adopted sons, I guess, right? And say, no, I'm sleeping with my sons. He's not my son. He's my brother. He's a brother. Oh man, they made a video on that. They made a video about Muhammad's belief that the fly would carry disease on one wing and the antidote on the other wing. So if a fly came into your water or your food, you have to dip the fly into the whole fly into the food so that you get the antidote. They did a video on the belief that water is pure, always pure. So even if there's rotting carcasses, because the followers were asking, well, there's this water well, but it's filled with dead carcasses. Can we drink it, Mom? He said, water is always pure. So you guys go drink it. That's actual hadith. I mean, so they make these satirical videos where they say, oh my goodness, that's what the Prophet Muhammad said. Yeah, well, let's go drink that water. They drink it. They say, that's delicious. Well, the scripture said it's pure. And then 8 hours later, they're barfing into the sea. Right? They make this satirical video. But it just exposes how crazy this is. The fact that he's regulating, ruling every little crazy thing of his life, and some of these things are just completely false. blatantly false. I mean, anyways, it's a highly, highly. And then at each video, he always has these liberals in a art studio, looking at this art piece of these three men converting to Islam, and they're looking at this picture like, as if they're analyzing the art and understanding. And they, oh yes, with champagne glasses, all these white people, standing around in an art studio, like, oh, that's such a beautiful painting. Oh, they're converting to Islam. Wow, what a beautiful religion. It's a religion of peace. Oh, they're all dressed like these little elite leftists, Oh, golly, so sick. But it's such an amazing, amazing thing. As people get exposed to the realities of what moves social dynamics, how people move and how respond to incentives, you can see how society actually works, which is, of course, what they don't want you to see. Now, that's